Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for coming. If you would all stand for the pledge.
Oh, this one right there. I don't want to be the...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for those of you who don't know who I am, Patty Tompkins, Supervisor of the Town of Unionville, and I would like to introduce you to you, Mr. Mark Molinaro.
That was easy. Thanks. Thank you very much, Supervisor, and let me say it has been a pleasure working with you. I know your term will come to an end at the end of the year, but we've had a good working relationship, and we appreciate that. And I would say this time of year is always one of those, for us, for we elected officials, this time of year is always a little strange because we're saying goodbye to some people who we've worked with who may have not won an election or maybe decided not to win an election, and then we have to welcome new people that we don't really know in certain circumstances and try to get them prepared. So actually, I could say this to you, just so if you don't know, it's a bit of a transition going on in county government as we speak. Today, this afternoon, it was confirmed that Robin Lois had secured enough votes to be... We're not clapping for that. I'm just saying, please don't clap either way. We're very happy. Met with her yesterday, and I'm just saying, I tend to treat town hall meetings like my house. When my dad has something nice to say, we don't clap for him. We just say thanks, great, we move on to the next topic. But she secured enough votes today to come in to officially declare herself the victor of the county comptroller's race. So we met with her on Monday. Began a transition process. I can count pretty effectively, and we thought that we would begin that process. And she met with the budget director, Jessica White, who's here with us today, along with the Commissioner of Finance, Heidi Seelbach. And we'll begin working with her in her transition. Look forward to being able to work with her as well. So it's one of those times a year where things just get awkward for a period of time. But the one thing that is consistent in Dutchess County as it relates to this time of year is the county budget. The county charter requires the county executive to present on or before November 1st his or her proposed budget for the coming year. Now, government budgeting is always interesting, and you could chuckle about that, but what is the most difficult part about government budgeting is we have to establish the budget for the entire year on or before, in our case, December 15th, I think, is the final of the votes. So, think about that for a second. You have to take your entire household budget for the next year, and you have to establish it. And oh, by the way, you can't change it. So the only good news for government, I guess, is generally speaking, if we establish the tax levy, it won't go down. But if we have some unforeseen circumstance, it can't go up. And that's one of our revenue streams. So we're required to establish for the entire following year, next year, the budget and have it adopted by the county legislature prior to the end of the year, prior to the December 15 deadline. I'm required to release a budget by November 1st, which I have done ahead of that deadline every year I've been county executive. This is my 6th year as county executive. I appreciate the honor of serving. We've tried to release it earlier than we did this year, although we were a day early this year. But the scheduling just required us to release the budget on Halloween. And Alan Sermon, who's here, represents all of the town, portion of the town. You share with Donna Bollner? No. Mark. Oh, Coviello represents, that's right, okay, I apologize. Mark Coviello and Alan Sermon both represent Unionville in the town of, in the county legislature. But I said to the legislature, there's no way I would release a bad budget on Halloween, because that wouldn't go well. There's a lot of stories that could be told by that. But we presented the budget on October 31st. The county legislature Budget, Finance, and Personnel Committee is the committee that has jurisdiction. They reviewed it. They made some minor amendments last night. and endorsed it. All but one of the county legislators voted in favor of it. So Republican, Democrat members of the Budget, Finance, Personnel Committee voted in favor to move the budget then to final adoption, which will be done or considered next Thursday. Is that right? Yeah, next Thursday, the legislature. So what I'd like to do is, let me do two things. One, tell you why we do these things, and then as Jess is already trying to get me to keep moving, she's got us into the slides. Let me offer to you this. I think most of you know I served 12 years in local government. This town hall has a special place in my career, if you will, in public service for one important reason. It's not, maybe not be, you won't clap for this part, but in 2006 it was actually here in this town where I secured enough votes to be the candidate for the New York State Assembly after a few of the ladies in the back grilled me for a half hour. It was then now the late Fred Skorlik who had kind of made a last pitch, and I actually got enough votes to ultimately run for this New York State Assembly in 2006 in this very room. For some of you that was a good thing, for some of you maybe not so much, but I just have all of my public service career, which I admit has been every day of my adult life, I'm very proud of that, have tried to connect government with the people that it serves. And as a local government official for 12 years, mayor of Tivoli, you learn how personal the decision-making is, and that government is supposed to react and respond and be as accessible as possible. It's more difficult the higher you go in government, but nevertheless, you can make government accessible to people. And one of the things that we wanted to do when I became county executive was improve the website. We did that. We enhanced our communication tools. We have a Dutchess delivery, which is kind of like constant contact for county government. You can sign up and get information. We have the Facebook and Twitter presence, which we try to use to make sure that there's some engagement. People can interact. But we also launched a series of town hall meetings. And we've been doing it every year since. One round of town hall meetings for the budget to talk to you a little bit about what we propose, and one round for the state of the county. So in October, November, we hold a series of town hall meetings, and then in February, March, we hold another series of town hall meetings. Since 2012, we've held over 80 town hall forums across Dutchess County. This is actually the second time I've been here in Stanford and Unionville. Gosh, it was in Stanford. But nevertheless, in Unionville, since becoming county executive. And I think it's important. And at some point, I'll stop talking, and you can ask me questions, and that's what we're supposed to do. And I say this, by the way, because there are a number of elected officials who don't think public or town hall meetings are all that important. I'll tell you, I'd be the first to tell you, I think members of Congress should do it. So I told my congressman he needs to do those things. I think the governor should do these sort of things. And many governors across the state do that. I think it's important. And I think it's important that towns, villages, and cities do it so that people have an ability to interact, not just when they're seated behind the table, and rather have some sort of open dialogue. So the budget we presented on October 31st continues an effort by county government to constrain taxes, property tax in particular, but also expand services where we think services are appropriate. Now, we had been living, when I came into office, we had sort of the last couple of years of the Great Recession. You all know what that meant. For county government and local governments, it was a pretty painful experience because, in particular, county governments all saw a huge spike in demand for mandated services, those things that people rely on during the hardest of economic times, but at the same time saw a dramatic decrease in assessed valuation and revenue. So here we had this enormous push for new services, the demand for services, among the most expensive and appropriate, important for those who need them, social services, mental health cases, etc. All important. We needed to provide them, but we had a much smaller, 25% reduction in the total county assessed valuation. So the pie shrunk. So every year since, we've been trying to get back to a point where we're providing the right and appropriate level of core county services, but at the same time recognize that people are overtaxed. So this budget represents the fourth consecutive tax levy reduction. This is only your Dutchess County tax. So the county tax levy in this budget is reduced by another $90,000, although I don't know the impact of last night. No, it's flat, right, even the amendment. So, so this is the fourth consecutive tax levy reduction. This is the third consecutive tax rate reduction. The rate reduction is important as well. Levy is how much we take from you, and we know we take it. You don't want to give it to us willingly necessarily, but we take it, so we're taking a little bit less. And then the rate, assuming your assessed valuation hasn't changed at all, is the dollar amount, right, that we use to calculate how much you're going to pay. So in both cases, for tax levy reductions, this is the third reduction in the county tax rate, and that's as a result of some assessed valuation increases, meaning economic growth, and a real effort to try to constrain spending. Go ahead, Jess. See, now she's already behind me. As I mentioned, this is, we're only responsible for your county taxes. And I offer that because many times I'll answer any question you want, but people will call or ask, say, well, my school taxes are so much. That is true. Your school taxes are. Your school taxes are probably 70% of your total tax bill. That's a product of school spending and state mandated spending and how that gets solved between Albany and local school districts. Now, I'll tell you that states like Virginia, for instance, spend less at the state level and less at the local level for schools, yet have a higher result rate, and the tax burden is significantly less. That's a problem that New York needs to confront. How they do that is obviously up to Albany and those decision makers. But your county tax levy, your county tax bill, represents 12% of your total tax bill. So when you get that tax bill, 12% of that is and goes to Dutchess County. And there's no way of saying on average what that is. It's based on how much you pay, but 12% of your total land tax goes to Dutchess County. The budget represents a $106 million tax levy, as I said, and some change. It's $90,000 less than last year, but admittedly that's a modest reduction, but a reduction. The budget that I proposed is a $480 million spending plan. That represents a 2.4% increase in spending over last year. There's a few reasons for that. Healthcare in particular, 9–10% increase average in health insurance rates. Even though there was a slight reduction in pension costs because of the cost of salaries and increase in labor costs, we really didn't benefit from that in any particular way. Energy costs, electric costs down a little bit, about flat. Fuel costs down a little bit, but principally state mandated expenditures and health insurance driving up, and workers' compensation insurance driving up some of that spending. So $480 million budget, 2.4% increase over last year. Go ahead. We like to point to the county's bond rating. It's important. One of the reasons we do that, do I have a fund balance slide? Or do we skip past that? I don't think we do in this. Okay. That's okay. So one of the important efforts that we really placed at high priority was stabilizing the county's finances. Again, Great Recession, degrade in assessed valuation. I came into office at a time when there was the use of nearly all the county fund balance for the purposes of balancing out the county budget. Fund balance is like your savings account. They used the savings account to fill the gap in the budget. And we really made an effort to reestablish that fund balance, to ensure fiscal stability, and increase the county's bond rating. When I had come into office, there was a slight reduction in the county's bond rating. Bond rating is like your credit report, your credit rating. You want a higher number, we want a higher grade. The higher the grade is really important for two reasons. Number one, higher grade means when we borrow money, the lenders, bond buyers and sellers, but the lenders are going to give us a lower interest rate. And when we borrow millions upon millions of dollars each and every year in order to pay for capital expenses, so an 1/8% on your interest rate has a big and important impact on day-to-day expenditures. So AA plus is the second highest bond rating of any county in the state. So we're very happy, very proud about that. First, again, lower interest rates when we borrow. Second, it sends a message to employers, in particular major employers. Big employers, big economic development efforts, big employers like healthcare, IBM, and even investors like Silo Ridge. They want to be certain that the community has fiscal stability. I can tell you this, and we've said this publicly, we know the effect of this firsthand because we had a major investor who wanted to make an investment in the city of Poughkeepsie, and despite every effort, they watched a few city council meetings, and frankly, they decided they didn't want to bother. And that's why we've been working with the city to stabilize their fiscal situation as well. It is very critical, in particular to employers, that we have a high bond rating. It sends a very important message about the strength of the economy, the fiscal management, and from our perspective, this is Standard & Poor's. that does the bond rating for us, they have expressed support for and are encouraged by the county's fiscal management. Good. This is my favorite slide. It is my favorite slide for a lot of reasons. Do I have my dollar? I'll get back to my corner, don't worry. This is important. I'm not going to harp on it, but it is important. This is your dollar, and we, as I said, recognize that we take this from you. You don't necessarily want to pay taxes, property taxes, but it's an important representation, and it's my favorite for this reason. 70% of the county's budget, 70% of the county's tax levy, and 70 cents of every property tax dollar we take from you goes to support some state-mandated expenditure. And what that means is that while we have some control over that 70%, when we come into each year, each budget year, the first 70 cents of the dollar, the first 70% of the budget is dictated by Albany. Now, New York is the only state in America that forces so much of its state spending down onto local property taxpayers. Now, you could argue, well, listen, what does it matter? It comes out of my left pocket or my right pocket. There's a difference. Property taxes are regressive. They are exceptionally regressive compared to a graduated income tax. So what New York does is forces a lot of its spending, major programs like Medicaid, early intervention, special education, preschool, and they force it down onto a finite assessed valuation, a smaller tax base. So the impact is greater. And from most people's perspective, property taxes don't necessarily, that's why they're considered more regressive, property value doesn't necessarily reflect wealth. So you can be a farmer, have several hundred acres of land, and your value of the land is very, very high, but maybe you don't have much of a profit, so your ability to pay that is much less. Most other states keep state spending at the state level, and they impose an income tax. And that income tax is generally graduated, like New York's, more progressive. And therefore, there's an effort to try to match the ability to pay with the cost of doing business. This is also important because of a very basic concept, and that just is, if you're not paying the bill, you're not as concerned about waste, fraud, and abuse. You're not as concerned about whether or not it's an efficient delivery. Bill McCabe and I know each other. If, let's say for a minute, Bill and I were out to lunch, and I knew I was paying, I would probably say to him, ham sandwich and a cup of soup. But if I knew Alan Sermon was paying, I'd say, let's have lobster and filet mignon. And the truth of the matter is, and this is proven out twice in recent years, when the state is not paying the bill, they are less concerned about the rate of growth. That proved out with both Medicaid and special education. Can answer those questions if you wish. But nevertheless, when the state took more responsibility for Medicaid expenditures, guess what? The rate of growth suddenly slowed. Instead of 8% or 7% annually, it slowed to 2% annually because the state was taking on a greater amount of the burden and therefore was more focused on trying to reduce inefficiencies. But what this also says is, New York says to us, 70% is mandated, the rest of it is optional. You can do this if you want. So they say to us, the optional services that we provide, things like 911 and plowing streets when it snows, those are things we don't have to do. But if you want to do them, you can. And it's a good representation because what it suggests to you is if we don't need the other 70 cents. So that 12% of your total property tax bill that goes to the county, 70% of that is for services that we don't have much control over. But the remaining 30 cents is really all we need in county government to provide core county services. And there isn't a county in New York that doesn't agree with this. Some are 80%, some are 90%, we're at 70%, that says, listen, if you take 10 cents back, we'll give it to the taxpayer. We don't need more than 30 cents. But we need that 30 cents to run county government. The rest of it is to run programs that you're responsible for. So the budget that we presented includes a $26 million investment in streets and highways, roads and bridges. Just as a reference, this year, 2017, Dutchess County paved 20 miles of county highways. We've repaired or replaced 13 bridges, although I just learned one in Tivoli is going to be delayed until the spring. It's open, but they're not finishing it. You'd think the Public Works Department would want to get the Tivoli bridge done, but nevertheless, a little problem with the contractor. But they can drive over it. That's just not finished. We just opened Hollow Road in the town of Clinton, I think. Oh, it's open tomorrow. I saw the press release, and it's tomorrow. We're opening Hollow Road in the town of Clinton. But nevertheless, 13 bridges. And this is an astounding number to me. It just really is. This year, Dutchess County's Department of Public Works committed over 500,000 hours of snow removal. I mean, if you think about that for a minute, that is a huge amount of time plowing snow. And we have great public works and really terrific county employees. I think we partner with the town of Unionville, don't we, on a few county roads where you provide.
Not this year.
No, not this year. Well, you had provided some effort where you plow some of our streets. But nevertheless, 500,000 hours of snow removal, if you can imagine it, $26 million investment in highways and bridges. And Dutchess County has been pretty aggressive in trying to maintain investment in infrastructure. I can talk a little bit about our Think Dutchess Alliance for Business. This is a restructuring of the economic development apparatus. When I came into office, our economic development efforts were really focused on what happened when IBM left. And quite frankly, that was a long time ago. And we're never going to be in a position where you're welcoming 10,000 jobs again. I mean, communities in New York aren't seeing that kind of growth. Instead, we've been focused on supporting existing businesses. 70% of new jobs are created by existing small businesses. That's important. So Think Dutchess is an alliance of business organizations. We used to have 13. We consolidated down to, I think, 5 or 6, including the Chamber of Commerce to support existing businesses. We're focused on downtown, Main Street, community centers, because that's where the innovators go. In the kind of economic growth that we think will generate the biggest return on the lowest investment is to support those kind of small manufacturers, those kind of small innovators who want to invest in sort of small startups, small investment. Again, it might be 5 or 10 jobs, but it's how you get to 510 or 500,000 jobs. You start in your garage. We want to be able to support those businesses. And at the same time, we are effectively out across the country and the globe encouraging new investment. That's how iPark City took over, bought through National Resources, bought the old IBM facility in Hopewell. It's now already has 2 tenants that are manufacturers that are located there. So we're trying to attract new businesses. Interestingly, just as a point of reference, Eastern Dutchess, you know, for 25 years, you could argue, well, I represented Eastern Dutchess. I don't know there was ever a time where Eastern Dutchess didn't say something like, we don't get our fair share of attention, but the truth of the matter is economic growth in Dutchess County today, the biggest projects are in Eastern Dutchess County. Biggest investments being made in Eastern, whether it's Cricket Valley, if you like that or not. We have been supportive of the Cricket Valley investment, or Silo Ridge. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of investment in Eastern Dutchess County. And of course, there is that kind of, there are similar investments in the rest of the county, and we are seeing growth. There was a stat out that somebody who wanted to be a county legislator said last year Dutchess County lost jobs. We did not. We had a net growth in both private and public sector jobs last year. We'd like it to be stronger, but we're swimming against a very expensive state. And what Think Dutchess is a very innovative, sort of agile effort to attract and support the existing businesses to grow economic activity. I'm sorry, and we committed $450,000 to the county's Think Dutchess economic development effort. Tourism, tourism is still the largest industry segment in Dutchess County. And those are big and little jobs. Some people like to sort of dismiss tourism jobs. I wouldn't, because some of them are very high-paying jobs. Some of them are manufacturers, agriculture, breweries, wine vineyards and wineries. So these are quality businesses that are growing, and even during the most difficult of economic times, our tourism industry has grown. Today, it represents 10,000 jobs. It's about $500 million worth of tourist spending. Tourism spending is important too, because when somebody comes out from outside of Dutchess County into your community and spends $1 at the local grocery store or at the cafe or the bed and breakfast, it has a $7 ripple effect. That local business is likely to spend it on something else which is local, which spends it on something else which is local. So it's a very powerful investment. And last year, 2 years ago, we welcomed 4.75 million visitors to Dutchess County. I shake their hands and welcome them all. Go ahead. So we continue our investment in tourism, 10% increase, 12% increase in tourism promotion, thereabouts. Is that right? Am I wrong? You don't remember? I don't. It's a 10% increase in our commitment to tourism. Since Jeff doesn't remember, that's exactly the number it is. Also, this year, putting a very focused. 10% for arts. It is, yes, thank you. It's 10% increase in our tourism spending, tourism promotion efforts, 20% increase in our commitment to arts mid-Hudson, arts major component of the economy, actually a very vibrant component of Dutchess County's economy. This budget includes a commitment to focus on support for children. In particular, there are a couple efforts. One is our broad effort, Path to Promise. We are currently engaged, bless you, currently engaged in a total analysis of all the youth-related services provided by county government and then provided by everyone else, churches, little leagues, towns, villages, to identify how we're providing youth services and whether or not we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. How do we ensure that if we're going to invest in a young person, use your dollars, that we get the biggest bang and the greatest return? And we know that we're not doing as well as we can because of the continued growth, and it's one segment, but the continued growth of the largest, I think, most important public health epidemic in our lifetime, and that's the opioid and heroin epidemic. I could speak to that. But nevertheless, some investment in adoption, trying to get older children in the foster care system adopted, so we're investing in trying to make the connection there. Peer outreach, this is important. There are families who are parents dealing with their own mental health or drug addiction issues, and they're at the verge of losing their children to the system. This is a peer interaction effort, which is to say those who have already gone through that process and are in recovery and sort of know the system, working with parents to try to strengthen them so they don't lose their child. Nothing worse than to dissolve a family unit. So our goal is to keep families connected. It's another investment we're making. We're expanding our commitment to the Boys and Girls Club in the city of Poughkeepsie. It's been a good, a very, very positive effort in the city, but it's part of a broader effort countywide to invest in youth services in all of the communities of Dutchess. I sort of referred to it. First, there is little question that heroin and opioid addiction and abuse is the public health epidemic of our lifetime. I posted just yesterday, just as a reference, a vial, a picture of a vial of heroin. That vial about that big. 2/3 of that, by the way, has a powerful, powerful effect. When you link it with another illegal drug, fentanyl, on the market, illegal drug fentanyl, fentanyl, just a powder, just a few drops of it, doesn't even fill the bottom of a vial, is more powerful, more deadly. And what we're finding more and more is that in particular young people, but others, find their way into illicit drugs either through accessing prescription drugs. The county, Dutchess County, is one of the counties that took legal action against those who would advertise and promote pain medication without providing support for addiction. They're very powerful. So there are those who may find their way to heroin because of access to painkillers. There are those who may find their way to heroin because they've opened the door to illegal drugs, and they find their way to heroin. It is very powerful. It triggers entirely changes the chemical composition of your brain waves, if the flow of your brain, and creates a very, very powerful addiction. And it is just not possible for any old person to overcome that addiction without support. And then when you marry it with fentanyl and others, it's a powerful, powerful addiction that is taking too many lives. So Dutchess County has actually made a major investment in mental health services. This budget, it continues that effort with the creation of Addiction Prevention Coordinator. This is somebody to kind of coordinate all of those drug-related efforts that we have underway so that we're all talking together, working together, and focused on outcomes. We're committing additional resources to recovery coaches. We want to be more radical. We don't want to just say, listen, if you have a problem, you can come to us. You can. 485-9700 is Dutchess County's helpline. You can come to our stabilization center. Alan and others supported the creation of that. Unlike anything else in America, but we can't just sit back and wait for people to come to us. We have to be out on the streets and go to where the addicts are. And recovery coaches are individuals who are on the road to recovery or have overcome addiction or dealing with addiction, and they work together with people on the streets, in the neighborhoods, in their communities to try to overcome the addiction. We're also committing some dollars to promote those services so that people know where they are, but not promote them in the old-fashioned way. In fact, the old-fashioned way ended this year. Dutchess County's Department of Behavioral and Community Health every year paid for a Yellow Page ad. Anybody own do you get the yellow? I mean, the yellow pages get dropped off by your mailbox. I'm not sure that not many people get it from the mailbox to their house. It usually ends up in the garbage can. So we're saying to our department, listen, we need to be more creative, obviously, and be able to reach out into communities and talk to those who are dealing with addiction in the way they want to be talked to. So we're going to partner with Spark Media. This is an after-school, in essence, job mentoring program that does digital media, and they're going to work with us to promote our services to get to where we need to go. Major investment in mental health and drug addiction services under the umbrella of our effort called Breaking Through. It's to break through the bureaucracy, break through the silos that exist within government, break through the epidemic, and to overcome the stigma associated with addiction and mental health. So I'll be the first to tell you, every time I post this on Facebook, somebody says, well, they could just choose not to. Yes, that's convenient, but they are now addicted, and I believe in the preservation of life. So if you're dealing with addiction, I don't think the response is, well, you get 2 Narcan shots and that's it. The response is, we will do everything we can to save your life. And if that means we have to work with you time and time again, and you fall off that wagon time and time again, we will continue to do that because every life counts. And I don't think I want to say to a mother, hey, listen, you get 3 shots and otherwise you're out of here. And there are people who say that. So we've got to, and that keeps, that stigma, that mindset keeps people who are dealing with severe mental illness and drug addiction from coming forward. And the only way we're going to break through is to have them come forward and be able to connect them to services. So we will continue to do that, and we will use your dollars to do that, so long as you continue to let me be county executive. But that is important. Go ahead. You may be familiar, I won't go into a long diatribe, but you may be familiar with our Think Differently initiative. This is an effort to invest and support those with special needs and developmental disabilities. This is actually 4 years now. We launched this program, very successful, very supported and embraced in the community. We now have 80 communities across the state that have embraced Think Differently. We've got a couple of communities outside of New York that actually have embraced Think Differently as a set of principles that says we need to see the humanity in one another, that those people living with disabilities, one of whom is my daughter, need to have a community that embraces, supports, and respects them. We have to confront the sort of the quiet prejudice of low expectation, that somebody because of ability can't accomplish something. And that's what Think Differently is all about. The budget includes a major continued investment. I won't go into all of them. You can see them there. Happy to talk about that as well, but this continued effort to support those with developmental disabilities. Is that it? Look at that. That's great. Okay, so again, the budget provides what we could, modest tax relief. It includes a commitment to continue to grow the county's economy and an overall commitment to try to provide support to families and residents, both from law enforcement and investment in infrastructure to those social services and efforts that I already described to you. So with that, at this point, what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to ask questions. If you don't mind, if you do, I think I know most of you, but if you do ask a question, just give me your first name. I'm not all that particular, but I just want to make sure I remember who I'm talking to. And secondly, if there's an issue that I've not covered and you don't want to ask today, you can visit dutchessny.gov. Dutchessny.gov is the county's website. All of this, including all 1,300 pages of the county budget, is online. You can take a look at every one of them, along with the budget in brief. It's a document that I think you have. We started that in 2012, an effort to kind of summarize what's being proposed, so you have an opportunity to kind of digest it and then formulate some questions. And if you like, you can send an email to us. We desperately try to make sure we respond to everybody. I know that we don't, although our goal is to. So if you have a question that you don't want to ask today or something comes up, you can shoot me an email or call our office at 845-486-2000. So with that, if you have a question, I'd be happy to take it. Yes, Bill. I think I have to do this so that you can be heard, right? I mean, unless you don't want to be heard.
Thank you, Marcus. One of the other sources of income that the county has is the sales tax. And sales tax revenues have been increasing as the county has rebounded from the bad times of the past 10 years or 15 years. The county used to share more of the sales tax with towns and municipalities. Do you anticipate the county sharing at the same level that it used to? And when?
Riding a horse cart again? I say that half humility. So let me offer a bit of context, and I think you know it. You served in the legislature with me, probably the time that the agreement between Dutchess County and its municipalities ceased to exist. Now, I can't speak for my predecessor or the legislature that never brought the topic up, but I can tell you that when I came into office in 2012, the contract that provided the county the ability to collect sales tax and distribute it to its municipalities had ceased in 2005 or 2003. New York state law says in order for Dutchess County, any county in New York, to collect a sales tax above a certain percent, that the cities in that community need to relinquish their right to collect the tax. So the only reason Dutchess County gets to collect the sales tax is not because Unionville said they don't want to collect the sales tax, it's because City of Beacon and City of Poughkeepsie in the late 1970s said, you know what, we would be better off if we didn't have our local sales tax, but you county, you take one. But if you take it, we want to make sure we get our fair share. And in 1975, the two cities, actually Beacon got hurt, but Poughkeepsie got more than its fair share, well more than its fair share. So that contract had existed every 10 years, approved, renewed every 10 years until 2003 when it lapsed. Now, I knew this coming into office, and Brad Kendall's here. Brad's the county clerk. Brad was very, very kind, and he said the problem with me is that I don't necessarily hide from the difficult problems, although I may not solve them the way you want me to, but I'd like to get them done. One of the ones we had to deal with was this sales tax agreement, mostly because there was a town comptroller in a town adjacent to us who had threatened to sue us. You might remember him. He's in jail now. But nevertheless, he threatened to sue the county. And had he sued the county, we wouldn't be able to collect sales tax. So I came into office at a time where we were facing a $40 million budget gap, and we had the threat of litigation, and we knew we needed to address the failure of the county to finalize that agreement. So I brought all the supervisors and mayors together, and I said, listen, for 35 years we've collected a sales tax, well, less than that, but 35 years we collected a sales tax. 18.5% of that is given to the municipalities, and the overwhelming majority of that 18.5%, the overwhelming portion of that 18.5% goes to the city of Poughkeepsie. So on one side of the street, I have the city of Poughkeepsie and the city of Beacon, who are used to getting their money, and on the other side of the street, I have the town of Poughkeepsie and the town of Wappingers and the town of East Fishkill. They're big towns. And they said, you know what, and they've said this since 1990, I know because I was village mayor at the time, we don't like the agreement because the cities get most of the money, and they don't generate the money. We do, and they're right. Town of Poughkeepsie, town of Wappinger, town of East Fishkill generates the money. So now I have warring factions, the towns and the cities, who both want their fair share, and I have a $40 million budget gap with 70% of the budget going to things that are out of my control. So we said to the municipalities, what are the things that you want us to preserve? Supervisors said preserve planning and zoning, because the Department of Dutchess County's planning department supports towns, villages, and cities. You've used our planning department to accomplish things. Well, we want you to preserve 911, which, by the way, is optional. Of course we're going to preserve 911. And we don't want you to continue to force election costs down on us. We used to have to pay for them, towns, villages. The state law said you should, but you're making us pay for them. So I said, okay, fine, let's do this. Let's agree that we're going to reduce the total amount we give you by $5 million. So we collect a sales tax, we give 18.5% to municipalities, but we said we're going to start at $5 million lower. At the same time, we're going to take back your election costs. That was about it was about $1 million at the time. You don't have to pay those things. And we're going to preserve the things that I would have to cut if I didn't have the revenue, so that you can continue to get services from us. And not a person said, great. But no supervisor and mayor said, that's awful. Because we all recognized that we needed to sacrifice, and we did. We also launched a shared services initiative, which I believe in. And I've always been in favor of sort of carrot and stick. If you want towns, villages, and cities to work together, you've got to give them an incentive. You can't just say beat them up. That's how the governor does it. We kind of try to incentivize it. So we created that initiative, and with that we were able to get consensus, new agreement. I know I have a problem with long answers to short questions, but it's important to give context. Fast forward to today. That agreement preserves the 18.5%. Municipalities get 18.5% of thereabouts of the county's sales tax collection. The first $25 million is distributed under the original agreement, which was the city of Poughkeepsie gets the lion's share. Every dollar above $25 million, and it's been about 2% growth each year since, gets distributed to all of the municipalities based on population. So the big towns got a slighter bump in that. You are correct that as of today, some, not all, but some of the towns are still receiving less today than they did when we adopted the agreement. But it's a 10-year agreement, and it is between the mayor of Poughkeepsie, the mayor of Beacon, and the county executive. But what is important to note, and often gets forgotten, is the municipalities are getting sales tax revenue. It is growing each year, and we are guaranteeing that delivery. We give it to them every year. In fact, we guarantee it, and if it goes down, we don't go down below 25 million. Not everybody would like that, I get it. But not everybody wanted us to cut stuff, and not everybody wanted to give up a little bit. So we needed to create a scenario where everybody felt like they gave up a little. That contract is in effect until 2023, and that contract will remain in effect until 2023. It's a 2%. It provides growth to municipalities. Everyone is getting more as sales tax grow. We project a 2% increase in sales tax next year. County Unionville will get 2% increase in sales tax next year. So they continue to see growth. We think that that's partly good. And I'll tell you, to the two cities, the mayor of Beacon was grateful because he was able to use the reduction in that initial sales tax to kind of negotiate certain things. And the mayor of Poughkeepsie at the time said not a word. I'm not interested in negotiating against myself. So we negotiated an agreement that was ratified in a bipartisan manner by the county legislature, the city council of Beacon, and the city council of Poughkeepsie. And the only way we can open that up again is if the three parties agree to negotiate. And we're at 2023. We're likely, if we start now if we were to open it up and negotiate again, we probably won't come to an agreement before 2023 because it's that complicated. But every municipality is getting sales tax, and they are getting more sales tax today than they did last year. Okay? Terrific. Other questions? Yes. Mrs.
Mr. Molinaro, thank you. I'm very pleased that you come around the county and you explain things. I think transparency is terribly important.
Okay.
To the effect of transparency, there are two suggestions I would like to make.
Please.
The first suggestion actually goes back to something in the county legislature last winter. It started. It was the proposal by a citizen who asked that the Dutchess County have a bill to prohibit the practice of pay-to-play, which, as you know, means that when a county does business with a corporation.
When anybody does business.
Right. Well, we are talking about the county. So it's any county does business with a corporation, that then the corporation later contributes to the campaign expenses of people running for office.
Yeah.
I believe that Westchester, Orange, Ulster,
Westchester, Orange,
and Rockland
and Rockland
have legislation banning pay-to-play. It makes it illegal. The citizen who mentioned this asked that this be brought to the floor. The Democrats were in the minority. One very courageous Republican representative, actually our representative, Mark, was good enough to say, well, I'd be willing to talk about it. However, they couldn't carry the day. This year, in September, I believe 1,000 signatures from people of all parties were brought in saying we would like legislation to ban pay-to-play. If there were legislation against pay-to-play, it would seem to me that it would be much easier for someone like yourself who is making a budget to find out where the monies are going and whether there is a suggestion of inappropriateness in giving contracts to certain people.
Okay. So let's start there.
Okay.
Let's go to number two. How's that?
Okay.
I can't talk about
Please.
that. I mean, I can, but no one would hear me. Well, I guess they would. Okay. First, I don't accept the premise, and that, thank you. I was going to say pretext. The premise. I don't need this legislation to know where our contracts go and who contributes to whom. We already have that. New York state law establishes how municipalities can let contracts, how we can contract with vendors. And Dutchess County, of the counties you mentioned, has the lowest threshold for requiring competitive bidding. We're currently at $20,000, $19,999. So anything we spend above $19,000, $20,000 is subject to a competitive bid. And what that means for county government is 85% of the contracts we enter into, and all of those courageous legislators don't ever say this, but they reference contracts that we give to vendors that are competitively bid. And they never say that they're competitively bid. They just say, oh, this guy, Dave Petrovitz, BTM, he got a contract. If you talk to BTM, they'll tell you, we want more contracts. But you always pick, not you, but people pick on BTM and so many others. They get their contract because it's more than $19,000, and we have to submit it for bid. We then are required by New York state law and federal law to accept, by extension, the lowest, most responsible bidder. We are not allowed to pick somebody because they're higher. So the premise is that the people who got the contracts got those contracts because they made a contribution to somebody's political campaign. That premise is entirely false unless you suggest that competitive bidding results in people getting contracts because they made a contribution. So my argument to you is that the real problem is New York. And I'm willing to do, I support a reform to New York State's campaign finance laws, but it needs to happen statewide. And let me offer to you why. So that's the premise, right? The second, though, is, so 85% of our contracts are let that way. We competitively bid them. Somebody criticized us. They said, well, you gave contracts to a company in San Francisco. It's actually one of those courageous legislators. We had to because they were the lowest, most responsible bidder. In fact, I wanted to establish a local bid preference where we would give local companies a higher consideration because we want to spend our money locally. Federal law says you can't do that. So we're stuck in that system. Now, whether or not somebody gets a contract and chooses to contribute to somebody's campaign, that is their constitutional right. I don't know that I agree with it entirely. I don't think businesses should be able to contribute. I don't think unions should be able to contribute. I think people should be able to contribute. I think your extension of your First Amendment right is your right to contribute. But I don't know organizations and businesses that have First Amendment rights, but then again, you know the federal court decision that resulted in that. Number two, the counties that establish these laws don't enforce them. And you know why they don't enforce them? Because they're not enforceable. New York State has what's, and it's a common legal, you know my answer, and I'm giving it to you anyway. There's a preclusion. If the state of New York occupies the field of law, local governments can't. And what has been consistent is if New York State establishes penal code, criminal law, counties can't establish penal code, criminal law. We can't say, as some legislators, in fact, just yesterday, one wanted to say, everyone of a particular arrest, low-level offense, none of them go to jail. That's a change to New York State's criminal law. County governments can't do that. We're not allowed to. Why? Because the state has occupied the field. The counties that you mentioned, and I don't know that Westchester has the one that the others do, Rockland and Orange, they don't enforce the law. In fact, there was an expose by the Times-Herald Record on the Orange County law. Orange County says if you do business with the municipality, you cannot contribute more than $1,000 to the campaigns of the office holder. Now, there's two problems with that. Number one, the person who's challenging the office holder has no such preclusion. You understand? So if I'm running for county executive and I'm the opponent, I can collect as much money from those vendors as New York State law would provide. But the incumbent can only collect $1,000. So you know what happened in Orange and Rockland? They said, okay, fine, we'll live by that, $1,000. They created other accounts. There are now dozens upon dozens of what we call dark money accounts, shadow campaigns, the committee for really special elected officials that collect the money instead. Now here's the loophole, and Orange County did the full exposure of this, the Times-Herald Record did. The loophole is, if I contribute, you contribute, because I know you would want to contribute to me. The maximum limit under New York State law is too high, but it's $8,000. You can contribute $8,000 to my campaign. But if I open up, which they did in Orange, the account for super duper elected officials, I can collect $99,000. So what they found in Orange and Rockland is a total circumvention of their law and a huge growth in dark money. And those campaign accounts don't have to produce the same information. So people didn't know where the money was coming from. It took a news reporter to do it. Right now, if you don't want to support me because BTM made a $1,000 contribution to my campaign last year and they got $1 million worth of blacktop, if that's what you choose, that's your right. And it's my responsibility to tell you. So I don't agree with the premise, and I don't agree that counties can do it. Now, Ulster County is different and New York City is different, and this is important to acknowledge. Ulster County made a proposal that meets the legal test. It's the only county, they haven't adopted it, but it's the only county that met the legal test. And what is that? Thanks to New York City, the only reason a municipality can have an election law is if it wants to impose public financing. So New York City adopted campaign finance rule changes. They said no more contributions. And in exchange for that, since New York doesn't do it, doesn't occupy this field, we're going to put taxpayer money into campaigns. That's an entirely different argument. If you want to support that, I welcome that conversation. But I, at the moment, don't think I want to tax anybody extra money. I'll finish, and what we'll do is we'll go around, and I'm sure you're going to want to get back to it. So my point is, so New York State says New York City can do that. So Ulster County last year proposed a law that created public financing of campaigns. And if you call Mike Hine, the Democrat county executive in Ulster, and you say to him, why do you think this meets the test and Orange doesn't, he will tell you exactly what he told me. The public finance component gives the county the ability to do this. I am willing, and I'm sure Alan would be too, to have a full-out debate over whether or not we should have campaign finance that includes public financing. And if at the end of the day, Dutchess County residents want a portion of their tax money to go to support campaigns, then that's the right of Dutchess County taxpayers. But I would offer you one caveat, and then I'll be done. New York State doesn't allow us to change what we can spend the money on. So currently in New York, they are the most porous election laws in the country. There was a state senator who actually got away, who was charged and then ultimately was found innocent, who was able to buy a pool cover for his swimming pool in his house with his campaign account because he hosted fundraisers there. That's what New York State law says. And my fear is what we end up doing with public financing is we take your money and we don't change what you can spend it on. That's frightening to me. But I would say if there was a rule that said everybody, town, village, city, county, office holders, and opponents, wanted to live by a certain campaign finance standard, I'd be open to that. But that's not what their proposal says. Their proposal allows the supervisor of the town of Poughkeepsie to raise as much money as he or she wants, and it would not be subject to this law. While the person he or she wishes to challenge at the county level, the Republican supervisor of the town of Poughkeepsie could raise $8,000 a pop from everybody who does business to run against the incumbent county comptroller who would be limited to $1,000. It's not a level playing field. Make them all $1,000. Anybody, everywhere. And if that were the case, then I think we'd have a much more honest conversation. Yes. Yes, I know.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I just want to quickly say that bringing it to the floor is what I would ask you to advocate, and that was what, yeah.
And I won't because it's not my right. We have two branches of government.
I understand that. I was asking, would you support bringing it to the floor?
I don't.
Okay, the
For all the reasons I explained.
The second part of my question has to do with the auditing process and the fact that as the author of the budget, I would assume that you would rely on the audits in order to know which departments were spending money wisely and which were not. Unfortunately, the auditor who has been here for the last 7 years completed within that 7 years, I believe, 89 audits. That's a fact because they have to be posted. It's not a he said, she said. Right, okay. His predecessor, who had also served for the same period of time, had posted 186 audits. More importantly, however, is that the audits done by the gentleman that you just announced is no longer going to be the comptroller.
I've always focused on he's not the comptroller.
Okay. No. So the audits done by him were primarily of the nonprofits with whom the county does business. That's fine. They should be audited. More importantly, I would think, as the maker of the budget, would be for you to see what exactly is being done within the departments of the county so that you can find where the funding is going. For instance, the comptroller's office, I believe it was a $900,000 salary for the comptroller and the support staff. Now, the production of 89 in 7 years as opposed to 186, I would think would bring questions to one's mind. So the question is, will you be asking for audits within county government?
Will I be asking for them?
Yes.
Only if I'm fool. I mean, we welcome them. I mean, I have no objection to audits. And what the comptroller, again, it's convenient most of the time when people want me not to have an opinion to dictate onto other branches of government that I should make sure that I don't impose my opinion on that branch of government. The comptroller is an independent elected official. And I would offer to you that there was, I mean, we may have shared a political party, but I think you could argue, and I think successfully, that it's not like it was chummy. But that said, that was his choice. This comptroller ran for office and said that she wants to do more audits. We welcome that, perfectly fine. But your premise, again, is so, it's jaded. And the reason I say that is, I don't sit on my chair for 6, 12 months waiting for the budget. Every single day, the woman over there in her office and the Commissioner of Finance, they're the chief fiscal officers, not the comptroller. Their job every single day, and she serves at the pleasure of the county executive, no protection, is to make sure that every dollar is spent effectively. So that assumes, number one, we have a series of checks and balances. That doesn't mean audits are bad. It just means your premise, your presumption is, well, wouldn't I want to know? Of course I want to know, which is why they do their job every day. They do their job every day to find out that the auto center, when I came into office, didn't have an adequate inventory, so we forced them to do that. That certain employees weren't clocking in and out, so we forced them to do that. That poor Rachel, who works in the budget office, you know, we wanted to save energy, so we put one of those sensor, you know, those light switches to save a few dollars, and since she's so small, if she doesn't move enough, the lights go off. My point is, what do you think we do every day? I am the chief executive officer of a $400 million corporation that is responsible for you. And by the way, no comptroller has ever done this. Diane Jablonski didn't do this. Jim Coughlin didn't do this. They didn't come out to the public and, subject themselves to this. It's because every day my job is to make sure that we spend the money wisely. And then we employ other people, third-party vendors. We have an audit that is conducted by the New York State Comptroller, who has identified no fiscal stress, and a third-party independent auditor. That happens every year. So those things occur. What I said to Robin, the new comptroller, the comptroller-elect, is work with us, identify what you want to accomplish, and of course we're going to respond. Of course we want you to. If there's an area of county government that concerns you, absolutely. But an audit is a useful tool, and then there are other tools. Now, to your point about the staff and the salary, I mean, come on. Those are established by New York State civil service law. Those employees aren't at-will employees. They get a salary. It's subject to New York State civil service. They don't even, by the way, the comptroller didn't have the right to just say, hey, listen, you're not doing your job, you're fired. These are government employees who have certain protections. Those salaries are established year in and year out. He can't and she can't just say, you're not doing your job well enough, we're going to cut your salary. You might like that, or maybe that's what we want to say, but the government protects government employees from politicians who walk into office and say, you're not doing it my way, so I'm going to penalize you. So that has to be addressed. Now, as far as the county comptroller's salary, that's been the same for 12 years. So that hasn't changed. But to your overall point, sure, we welcome it. Jess and Heidi met with Robin. I'll welcome them. I'll encourage areas. There are whole areas of government that need to be reviewed. Here's a few. Medicaid expenditures, the New York State's reimbursement for special education preschool, but Medicaid's $49 million, huge government base. The county airport, absolutely stay on it because it's a functioning business. We want it to make money, and we've said to Robin, and I said to her Monday, just tell us if you identify something, we want to fix it, but I want to fix it when it happens. So if you're learning about it through an audit, call us, which she said, of course we would do. Tell us where it is so we fix it. So this isn't like we don't play a game. She's going to do her job. I welcome it. I encourage it. I want it done. And as they identify areas where we can improve efficiency, sure, absolutely. Welcome it.
If I gave you the impression that I thought you were playing a game,
you did.
I apologize.
Yeah.
My question was, would it not be helpful
it would.
to look at these audits and then to use that for the 85% of the contracts? There are still 15% that apparently are not bid on, and to use those two to become more transparent. It certainly was not a personal attack on the government.
It sure sounded it.
Well,
you said I sit around waiting, or wouldn't it be better? I think your line was, wouldn't it be useful to know where the money's being spent? I know where the money's being spent. I know every dollar of where the money's being spent. And there are dollars I wish weren't being spent in certain ways, but the government requires us to do it. But to your overall, if they audit, we will use them as tools to help us. We welcome that.
okay. all right? I think you're very sensitive on this, and I
I'm not.
apologize for intruding on your sensitivity.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We welcome audits. From anybody. You want to do one, come on down.
Good evening, Mark.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for being here this evening. My name is Adil Amir. I live in LaGrangeville.
I think I know you.
Yes, nice to see you again. I got two questions, if I can, please. I'll try and keep them very simple.
Yeah, it's 20 minutes to 4, so we got plenty of time.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you. Time flies when you're having fun, so I think we're all enjoying ourselves. My question, the first question to you is that in your numbers in your presentation, which was a very good presentation, I also thank you for being very accessible and available to the folks of, yeah, you are. It shows. That's wonderful. But also I think you are available, because I think right now, I think the challenge I think most Americans have is the politicians only being available or around when it's election time. Yeah. But you, as I said before, do indeed make the effort, and I, as one of the people living in this county, certainly appreciate that. My question to you, the first question to you is in your presentation, the numbers you presented. You talked about the levy, the property tax levy being $106 million. And you said the county budget is $480 million. Exactly. That's a very simple question, I think. That's fine. But the second question, which might be more apples and oranges, but nevertheless I wanted to express my protest, if you will, if I can do that, it's got nothing to do with Dutchess County or with you. It's more to deal with the fact that New Yorkers, the state of New York, is one of the highest, not one of the highest tax burden state in the country. And the difference between the average tax burden in any state versus New York is about $4,000 per year. I'm talking about all these taxes combined. The most recent bill that's going through the House and the Senate that just got approved by the House and will be up for a vote in the Senate, the tax bill I'm talking about, will have an extremely, in my opinion, inequitable tax increase for the state of New York, for the people of the state of New York. Because there are 4 states that are going to experience some very significant tax increases, and 46 states will have tax decreases to try and cover that $1.6 trillion tax cut that's coming down the pipe for corporations and the wealthy individuals. My question to you as an elected official, working with the governor, working with the senators is, when is somebody going to stand up with the state of New York, the folks of New York, and do something to try and combat this, in my opinion, very inequitable and unfair sort of tax legislation that's coming down the pike?
Let me offer, I share your, I'll say opposition to or concern with the federal tax bill, and I say this to my friends. It is an awful piece of legislation. Sorry. It is filled with corporate benefits. It is filled with special interests. It is filled with doling handouts. And I'm all for tax relief, all for it. In fact, the vice president of the Yankees, if you read he was a strong supporter of the president. He said, this is not tax reform. It isn't. It's taking an already awful system and making it more awful. It doesn't work. And knowing that, it also will penalize middle-class families south of Albany in New York, principally, California, and some other high-tax states. And you could argue, and we should, New York is overly taxed. We have too many taxes. We have too great of a tax burden. But the federal government shouldn't adopt policy that knowingly and, in my opinion, intentionally penalizes people who are in high-tax states. Fix that, and we can have a conversation. Otherwise, it's not good policy. It isn't, and it will not help us. It will create a major burden, principally for middle-class families, $150,000 or less, south of Albany, because in New York State, the combined property tax bill is such that that it'll exceed, right, your ability to write that off, and you lose the SALT, the state and local tax deduction. So that needs to be addressed. In my opinion, our congressman said it needed to be addressed, so I can't be too far off, but I will tell you, it is just bad policy. It's bad, and corporate jets and baseball stadiums, and eliminating of charitable contribution deductions for certain people. I mean, it's not good policy. It's like they gave it to a bunch of lobbyists and said, "Here, craft it," which is probably what happened. But that's also what happens in Albany, and that's why we have the burden we have. When I was in the state assembly, over a 2-year cycle, the legislature considers 10,000 pieces of legislation. I love my wife, but she doesn't have 10,000 great ideas in a year. She loves me. I don't have 10,000 great ideas in a year, and certainly none of them should be law, or not many of them. So what ends up happening in Albany is consistently we take what we did last year and we just add to it. This governor, to his credit, says instead of adding 4%, we're only going to add 2%. But we haven't confronted the underlying burden, which is the cost of delivery. And the reason that I reference that is there are are those of us who are standing up saying, listen, politics aside, we spend too much on, and get too little in return. There are other states who have robust Medicaid systems that don't require the kind of bureaucratic burdens that ours does. I mean, I was a recipient of SNAP. I'm a Medicaid supporter. My family benefited from food stamps when I was a kid. My daughter receives Medicaid services because of her disability. I want Medicaid to protect her. But it is wasteful, it is burdensome, it's inhumane, and it's very, very costly. So that in and of itself is what drives the cost in New York. Now, so we say, spend more effectively, spend more efficiently. And the reason I can say that is because when, as I mentioned to you, Medicaid used to grow at about 4 to 6% a year. That's when the state said, you counties pay for all the growth. And when they said, ultimately, we're going to cap it at 2% and then cap it at 0, that rate of growth slowed to 2%, which meant they were able to identify some savings. So what we say to Albany is, spend less. We don't have necessarily a revenue problem in New York. We have a spending problem in New York. And do it more efficiently and effectively. Work with the people on the ground. We empower, to the degree we can, county departments, elected officials. When they have a good idea, we try it out. I was joking about that light switch. Well, that's the kind of thing we did. When I came into office, just as one reference, the county executive, 7 of us, all signed 5 original copies of every contract. Why? Does anybody know? That's right. Nobody could answer, because that's the way we always did it. So I said, well, how about we do one? I mean, first of all, my wrist benefits from that, and second of all, it's a lot of paper. I think they did some kind of calculations, like $38,000 in savings in paper, or whatever it was at the time. My point being, little and big, we should be looking at how we spend the dollars and make them as efficient as possible. And if we are delivering Medicaid at the highest degree of efficiency, and then you want to have a debate as to whether or not that service is necessary, I'm willing to do it. But you can't penalize people who are reliant on support simply because the system is bloated. So to your question on the broad picture, we need to spend less and more effectively. There are those who would disagree, but what we've done in Dutchess is attempted to accomplish that, to be able to provide a service in a more efficient delivery, and we can point to it, we can show it. And then to the extent that these things, these public meetings and the forums and the website give you the ability to validate that information, we want you to do that. Albany needs to do the same thing. Otherwise, we will consistently see more and more people leave. New York leads the nation in outward migration. More residents leave New York than any other state in America, and we have the highest loss of 18 to 40-year-olds of any state in the country. Part of that is just natural. People, kids want to go to school someplace else. They don't want to come home until they're older. But other is we have too high of a burden with too limited job opportunities and income opportunities. And the cost and the burden of living here is so high that people choose other places to live. To your first question, the rest of the revenue is principally sales tax and then fees, et cetera, et cetera. Sales tax is now at 40% of the total revenue stream. So Dutchess County's largest revenue is sales tax. And what I would tell you is somebody asked me at a town hall meeting a while ago, why not lower the sales tax? Well, first of all, that would affect towns and villages who likely will end up having to come up with a way to make up the revenue, affect us too. But sales tax is, in our estimation, slightly more progressive than property tax, less progressive than income tax, but 60% of sales tax is paid for by people who don't live here. So you have people coming into the community spending money, and that sales tax comes to, comes to the communities to provide support, 60%. So for us, sales tax is a major and very important revenue stream and represents the bulk of the remaining revenue. I'm sorry, and then state and federal reimbursements. Well, for instance, we spend $1 for Medicaid. The state will cover 65 cents, 50 cents. Not a Medicaid.
Not Medicaid.
No, the other.
Medicaid is straight county cost.
I'm sorry, straight county costs $49 million, but other mandated services and social services, we'll spend $1, they give us 65 cents. We're still forced to spend the 35, but there's state revenue that offsets the portion of that, okay? Yes, you have to, I don't know, do this.
Okay.
I don't know if I can get back there. Yeah. How far does this go?
That's good.
She'll yell.
I have 2 questions. The first one's a layup. I promise it's a layup. The first question, and I'll ask both of them since the first one's such a layup. The first question is, what can you and your staff, like Jessica, what can you guys, with your new comptroller, what can you do to get us a AAA rating? Because that's a layup. The second question is, the AAA rating would make us proud because we'd be the only county with a AAA rating. Probably. Oh, they have a AAA. All right, well, we're on our way. The second question is, you're in a unique spot, and you have 22 towns, I think, and
20 towns, 8 villages, and 2 cities.
in 2 cities. Okay, so you're in a very good spot to tell us what do you think the towns are doing really well, and what do you think the towns should do better?
Just as, to show that I'm ecumenical or bipartisan in my hesitation and anxiety, I try not to tell towns, villages, and cities what they should do. We have, however, provided through our Shared Services Initiative the ability to incentivize their work. Your town has participated in our Shared Services Plan, and I would say, what can towns and villages do better? One of those 38 ideas in that plan that we organized this year, any one of those is another thing we could do better. I do believe that municipalities should share in the delivery of service where it makes sense. There is, and the governor has said this, and I'm saying it because I don't agree with him, not because I have any interest in that job, but I don't agree with him. He says there are 18,000 governments across the state of New York, we should have fewer. I mean, honestly, that's such a broad and generic statement. First, that's not even true. We don't have that many governments. And two, it doesn't always mean the elimination of a government means less costs or less taxes. I come from Red Hook. Red Hook has 2 villages, the village of Red Hook and the village of Tivoli. The village of Red Hook is right in the center of the town, and the highway department for the town and the village are right there. The court for the town and the village are right there. They're right there. So they're looking at consolidating those things because they're right there. Tivoli's 7 miles to the northwest. In order for the town of Red Hook to provide service to the village of Tivoli, let's say highway, they'd have to buy our trucks, not our trucks, Tivoli's trucks, and establish a crew there. Not likely to produce much savings. So elimination of Tivoli may not be cost effective except for the $1,200 they give the mayor. So my point is, I don't like decisions to be driven by some arbitrary outcome. I want us to identify where we can do better, do the analysis, prove it out, and do it. And if consolidating assessors or sharing courts saves you money, and you're getting a decent response, decent service, do it. If it doesn't, don't. So what you will get, and you will get, from the county is support to accomplish that goal. Do it as efficiently and effectively as possible, and we will help you. We have $1 million. In fact, the last 2 years it's been $2 million that we put on the table to incentivize and support those efforts. If you have good ideas, we'll support them. Work with the county to help identify where you can enhance the delivery of service. We'll support that. The first one was the layup. What was the layup?
AAA rate?
Yeah, we won't get there. And we could possibly. Let me explain why. Westchester County, and I know that sounds funny, is the only county with a higher bond rating. Why? It actually would devastate municipalities. Every county except Westchester, when you don't pay your town or village tax because you don't want to, the county, Dutchess, cuts a check to the town of Unionville to make up the difference. We make you whole. So if you have a tax levy of $100,000 and you only collect 82, or let's make it easier so my math is 85, we'll give you $15,000. That exposure is why we won't get, we could potentially, we won't get to a AAA rating because we're making the municipalities whole. Westchester is the other way around. If I have $100,000 of county tax levy and you only pay $85,000, the towns, villages, and cities make us whole. So if you would like a AAA rating, I would suggest present to the town board, preferably in January, a proposal to have the town of Unionville make Dutchess County whole for anyone who doesn't pay taxes in Unionville. No, I wouldn't do that. No, you're good. You're good. So, so I think AA plus. Yeah, AA plus is probably the best we're going to do. And it's funny because Rob Astorino and now George Latimer, we all know each other. But we would go around with all our county presentations, and you know, Astorino and now George will say, well, we have the highest bond rating. Well, sure, you have no risk. I mean, you could actually go out there and say to people, don't pay your taxes. I mean, doesn't matter what I collect, don't pay them, because the town's going to make it up. And in every other county in New York, it's the other way around. Other questions?
Could I just make one comment?
I don't know. Do you have to?
Only as a follow-up to what I just mentioned to you, the thing is there any discussion going on at any level at this point in time with the elected officials, starting with the local folks from the county executives, going up to the governor, going up to the senators and House members, to do something to try and bring to, if you will, at least public discussion, the tremendous impact the state of New York will have with this new tax bill? Because there's some Republican congressmen in New York who voted for it, actually. Yeah, right. So I guess what I'm saying, I think, is I'm not sure what they're thinking or what the rationale for doing something like that is. But the people of New York figure out exactly what the impact and consequence is. There'll be a lot more, I think, accountability an understanding of how negative this thing is.
Sure. Well, is there anyone? Yes. First, the New York State Association of Counties has assembled leadership at the county level to explain the impact and then have us advocate with our federal representatives. I will say to you, the ones that voted no are the ones that got the picture, got the point. But there are parts of the state where we won't have the same impact, and I think that is important. I don't know how this affects Cattaraugus County. But it's probably less of an impact because they have a lower property tax burden compared to income. So when you do the math, there are some congressional districts where they say the math proves that I'm going to get $800,000 tax break, and people like tax breaks. I don't happen to think that that's the right way to do it. But that said, there's an effort to educate local officials to help advocate at the federal level so that they don't impose this impact. The focus has been around SALT principally. We don't. It'd be nice to know every page of that bill, but what mostly affects New Yorkers is your ability to write off your state and local tax as a deduction on your income tax.
That's also the exemption and the mortgage interest deduction.
Yes, all of that. Exactly. It's going. Yeah. So that's been the focus of the education effort, and I will tell you what our Congress members say. They think, Democrat and Republican, that if the bill if the Senate adopts it slightly different, they'll have to negotiate a settlement, right, between the two houses. If they ultimately have a bill that doesn't have the SALT deduction in it, mortgage tax, etc., mortgage and interest write-off along with state and local property tax, state and local tax write-off, they don't have it in it. It will be really, really difficult for some of these members to vote for it. So the hope would be that that gets negotiated out between the two houses. And yes, we are locally among all the all the counties across the state making the argument. To his credit, the governor has said this is a bad bill. He's right. It is a bad bill. But when you said what are they thinking, let me close on this, and then I'll stop talking. I am passionate, and I do get anxious because when people say things, they matter. They matter to me. It matters when the president says something outrageously inaccurate. It matters. It matters when the governor says something outrageously inaccurate. It also matters when somebody says to me, "Hey, listen, you should probably fix this problem because something criminal is happening." If I don't think something's criminal is happening, then I don't think that there's a problem to fix. But it's my job to explain it to you. When Ronald Reagan was president, you might not have liked him, maybe you did or didn't, and they did their big tax reform at the time. They published a very large publication and took them 2 years to negotiate and adopt it. And over those 2 years, Congress members all across the country and senators all across the country went out to the public and said, this is what we're doing. Why don't you tell us? And actually, if you listen to, if you see the history of that bill, it changed over time because the public had an opportunity to press upon their members of Congress. Now, the outcome, maybe you supported or you didn't, but it was a 2-year open, democratic, lowercase d process that resulted in bipartisan support at the time and compromise. We are obsessed with instantaneous results. We are. If somebody texts you, now maybe some of you don't do this, they expect an instant response, right? If something happens, I expect you to instantly communicate with me. We are focused on instantaneous response and tribalism, political tribalism, where people of one political party say the only thing I need to do is keep the people of my political party happy. As long as they're happy, I'm happy. And the people of the other political parties say, well, my people need to be happy, so I don't have to work across the aisle. That is the end of democracy. It is corrupt. You will never get a good idea out of that. And you'll never be able to bridge the gap and the divide that occurs. So if you want solutions, and whether you agree or not with my premise, that's what this is. I mean, I didn't come into office saying, hey, listen, we're going to focus on opioids. But you know what? There are really smart people on every side of the aisle from every family across who said, we need to do things slightly differently. You can't do it this way. And if you want to solve that problem, you've got to change the way you're delivering. So we listen. My grandfather used to say, any good idea should be stolen. But, he wasn't in politics. But the point being, if something has a good idea, use it. Don't throw it away. Don't discard it. If it's a bad idea and you think so, say it. I think it's a bad idea. But if you're passionate about it, Robin Lois, come in, talk about it, let's meet, let's discuss it. If you're passionate about it, Hannah Black in the legislature, and that's what you want to focus on, let's talk about it. But don't sit in your little rooms and say, we're not going to have a conversation, you're wrong, I'm right, and that's it. That's what we have in Washington, and it's what we have in Albany. where people don't talk to one another. So what we try to do, to the extent we can at our level, is listen and work with people. They don't always like the outcome. They don't always think it's as honest as we think it is. But there is an earnest effort to try to get people, Democrats, Republicans at the local level, Democrats, Republicans at the county level, our state delegation. I am a huge fan of Dee Dee Barrett's. I've told people this. She has been responsive to Dutchess County. She doesn't share my party affiliation. She's been responsive to our needs. Karen Lawler has been responsive to our needs. Different parties, different people. We work together because that's what we have to do in order to solve a problem. That's, I think, what produces this. So what I would offer to all of you as we end this year and begin a new year with new elected officials is hold us all accountable. Force us to come here. Have us have these conversations and answer your questions. And if you don't like my answer, you don't have to support me. But you should know what it is I think. And you should know what your elected officials think. And I offer one last thought, which is don't be so damn predictable. By being members of tribes ourselves, politicians don't have to listen to you. If I go to a room of 100 people and they say to me, I will never vote for a Republican. Never. Well, first of all, I mean, I don't believe in finite definitions, but if I will never vote for a Republican, what chance or what right or what reason do I have to spend an hour and a half with you? You're not going to listen to me. You're not going to support my way of thinking. You're not going to give me the benefit of the doubt. Same if you go to 100 Republicans and say, I'll never vote for a Democrat. I hate that. You know why? Because the elected official doesn't have to listen. So they take the easy route and they go to the other room where there are going to be people that are going to vote for them. So lie to us. I mean this sincerely. I mean, I do. Lie to us. If you don't think you can vote for us, make us believe it anyway. And if you can actually think for voting across the aisle, then do that. Because it makes us have to react and respond to you. Albany and Washington don't feel they have to do that. So long as I'm here, I will continue to do what I think is necessary to hear what you have to say, to incorporate your idea. I hear everything. Try to put it to practice. If it makes sense, I'll use it. And if I don't think it makes sense, you have the right to hold me accountable for it. And that's what we need to do with other elected officials at every level. If you have other questions, dutchessny.gov. You can call our office, 486-2000. You can email me if you wish. But most importantly, to all of you, please enjoy the holidays. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. And let's hopefully have a very successful and prosperous new year. Thanks very much.